why 2025 is the single most pivotal year in our lifetime. I'm curious to know why.
An extraordinary moment in history. We are at a moment here in 2025 where we have world historic, game-changing technologies now starting to scale. But America and the world itself are going through huge contortions. And there's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. And the key piece of this is tipping points. When do you go from the slow build of a thing that's kind of clunky and not really working, to you all of a sudden get an iPhone that goes, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing in the world, and then everybody needs them. And what I'm trying to tell you now is we are in the middle of 3 tipping points that are world historic changes that are happening around us today. I'm Pete Leiden. I've basically been following the story of technology and its evolution and looking ahead into how it's going to change the world over the next 25 years. Way back in the 90s, in the earliest days of the internet, there was really only one place in the world that was really all over that, and that was Wired magazine. And it was in those early days that the founders of Wired picked up on me as someone who had the same kind of sensibility about the transformative nature of these technologies. And so they wooed me to work with them in the early days of Wired. Now, people had no idea what was even going on with the internet, and literally what's email, what's the web. They had no idea how these goofball startups with names like Amazon were ever going to amount to anything. And the other thing that was going on there beyond this digital revolution was essentially the beginning of globalization. And so myself and my co-author, which was Peter Schwartz, wrote a famous, iconic cover story at Wired that was called The Long Boom. And it was a history of the future, the story from 1980, which is in our past, to 2020, which was in our future, trying to explain what was really coming. Now, those of us who are in technology and those of us who have been immersed in it, which I have been for most of my career now, can see clearly these kind of incremental stages of these new technologies, that all successful new technologies go through a technology adoption curve. Let's say like...
So I think this is why I wanted to watch this, because I'm applying this. So, you know, it said there were 3 tipping points. In my view, the AI tipping point is also the blockchain tipping point, because I really see a convergence of blockchain and AI becoming this one big monster, which I think is being categorized here as just AI. But I don't think AI has its real utility until without blockchain, and I don't think blockchain has its real utility without AI.
Uber, the idea like, oh my God, instead of a taxi, it's all on your phone. And then all of a sudden, when enough people show how amazing it is, boom, the entire crew moves over. And the old system of the taxi system is gone. So you're watching an old system being essentially dismantled or having to come down at the same time as we're taking off on these new technologies to build the next systems. We're in the middle of that. Right now is smack in the middle of that in our era. But we've also seen this in American history before.
I've got to show you this, sorry. We're going to keep that. Did I make this video or did am I just... I think I made a video and I didn't... Oh, sorry. I hate chewing. I hate listening to chewing. Sorry. Ah, that's horrible. I'm thinking about me chewing and now it's horrible. I made a video. I've just interrupted that whole thing. I made a video that showed exactly that. I never posted the video.
There's been 3 previous junctures where Americans have found themselves in this exact place. Now, that's not to say it's common. Like, you know, this is 80 years ago,
Yep.
The last time we saw this. And they tend to come in these 80-year cycles. But what's amazing about these things is they have bursts of unbelievably widespread innovation that lasts for 25 years. The last big one was coming off World War II, 1945. 80 years ago, America was on a very similar parallels.
It's time. Come on.
We had basically were watching the essentially dismantling of the old world that had been working pretty well, the economy and societies of the West. And then there'd been a crash and you run into the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, what that was the old system of running the economy just wasn't working. And so what happens is you watch these junctures in American society, we get super polarized. For example, there was an America First movement in the 30s. We were on the verge of violent conflict in America. And then you had the FDR and the kind of New Deal coalition that came out of the Depression, and they started to get traction. But anyhow, we had to resolve this political tension in America. And frankly, it had to do it in the world because the world also was going through this juncture. And so from 1945 to 1970, we watched the great post-war boom. Many people call it the high point of global capitalism. And you built this crazy economy where you did many things that were completely different than the previous era. Tax the rich at 90%. You watched incredible investment in public infrastructure like the interstate highway system and building suburbs. You basically watched the GI Bill and education.
Think infrastructure for payments, blockchain, everything. But just draw the parallels.
Building institutions for higher education, expanding it for the boomers. That all happened in 25 years. The Great Society, the whole thing, 25 years. And then we ran in the 70s. It started kind of getting long in the tooth. Stagflation, oil shocks. But here's the point. Old system had to come down, super conflict around it, and ultimately the building of a thing that was dramatically different than before. We've been through that before. And funny enough, like I say, if you go another 80 years back, we did it again. It's 1865. What is 1865? It's the end of the American Civil War. Now, this is a good example of how passions run very high and political conflict is extreme at these junctures. In the Civil War, it was the most extreme. I mean, we literally had to have 750,000 Americans died in the Civil War. America, since the founding, had been in tension with these two economic systems. One was essentially a system of the early manufacturing economy where you needed free labor in the North. But in the old South, we basically had slavery. And they said, no, we're not going there. We're not going to give it up. We're not going to let go of this old system. We're going to fight to the death on the thing. And so this is a good example. Anyone rooted in the old systems that are going down are passionately want to defend that at all costs. Now, the thing that people do not know about the Civil War, or don't really remember as much about the Civil War, is the Civil War after 1865 had an unbelievable explosion of progress that lasted for, what do you know, 25 years. For example, the Homestead Act, which is you gave anybody who went out west 150 acres for free. There was also land-grant universities. All these little states started building institutes of higher education to educate average people, but also to be pushing scientific understanding of agriculture. But here's the other progress that was going on. It was technology. It was only miles of rail and essentially stitched the entire continent together with this steel-based rails. And essentially we reinvented America in 25 years. And here's the even crazier thing though. You go back another 80 years, we did it again.
Wow, I love this.
1787 to about 1810, 1815, we had created what is America. One way to understand what was happening in America at that time was it was part of a bigger part of Western Europe, in particular an extension of Britain, which was going through the Enlightenment at the time. The Enlightenment is essentially a fundamental system change from a feudal society kind of dominated by the Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff into essentially what we would now consider the modern world. And they invented 6 huge things that we still are working within today. Now, the reason I'm kind of saying that is that had world historic implications.
Yeah.
That was a building of a civilization that we essentially invented, we humans, but we Western Europe, in basically a space of 120 years. The forward motion of innovation, essentially from the West, was coming with those crazy ass Americans who had this wide open continent to spread it to. And that is what America's role has been vis-a-vis the West in every one of those epochs. I'm arguing we have one more crank of that wheel with the arrival of 3 world historic changes that are happening around us today. And the most obvious one is the arrival of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, tell us.
Chat GPT.
So we are getting started. 2025 was the 80-year time period. Then it's 20. So from this year, it's basically we got 25 years right now to capitalize on what's going on this change. You got 25 years in your life. For me, 25. I would be 50. I will not be quite 60 yet. It looks like when I'm older, it looks like it's probably going to get a bit difficult, but I'll have tons of money. So not as difficult for me.
We have one more crank of that wheel with the arrival of 3 world historic changes that are happening around us today. And the most obvious one is the arrival of artificial intelligence.
Chat GPT. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, then get ready, because this promises to be the viral sensation that could completely reset how we do things.
The arrival of generative AI, with the arrival of ChatGPT 3.5 in November of 2022, I think we're going to see that as a world historic moment. I think people will look back on that as the starting gun of what will be understood as the age of AI. And I use age in a very explicit way, which is when you talk about a different age that humans enter, like, oh, the humans, entered the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. I mean, you're talking about essentially a fundamental game-changing technology, a breakthrough, a step change in our abilities, that once you cross that threshold, you don't go back. We're going to watch an explosion of amplification. The amplification of our mental powers with digital computers and now AI are going to be very similar to the amplification of our physical powers that mechanical engines, initially by steam, created the prosperity and wealth of the world that we know now, where we're just going to say, holy shit, we had no idea this is the world we're in.
So you remember the whole NFT craze? I think for many people, for most people who are involved in crypto now, the NFT boom was the kind of like we all watched NFTs and thought, what NFTs are so much, there's so much more to NFTs. Why is this being popular with monkey pictures and penguin pictures and stuff? There's like a boom, right? There's like a boom of interest in NFTs, but NFTs themselves, as part of this bigger blockchain and wider AI move, the NFTs themselves are absolutely monumentally game changing. But pictures of monkeys aren't. But that's what gets popular for some reason. But NFTs is going to play a role in like how you move your own data around the world, how you access different insurance things. You can have control of your own healthcare data, and you could sell that, and you could earn income from these NFTs that you have about yourself. Like NFTs plays a role in smart contracts. So any contract that you have in the world, any contract, an agreement of any sort, think about the size of that. That's all going to change, and as a result of NFTs. Yet pictures of monkeys went viral. Like it's crazy to think. And with AI's implications for the world have not been seen yet. Like what we've seen is ChatGPT, and we will look back at this time where we use ChatGPT and all these like nice little agents that we use and think, wow, we really didn't know what AI was really about at that time. We were just it was like viral and trendy, and you've got these AI videos, like that's taking all of the attention. But the real use case of AI is going to be AI-powered machines that actually do real things in real time. Like it's going to change how we manufacture. It's going to change the financial system, because these massive financial entities, whether that's a global bank or whatever, is going to be run by AI-informed financial decision makers, just deciding which crypto is going to be used at which time for which payment corridor. all instantaneously. The whole world is going to run on this thing. And yet here we are having a fun chat with ChatGPT, like, oh, look what it said back to me. It kind of resembles what a human would say. Like, it's just funny how we distract ourselves with like the shiny thing at the beginning, and then it's the deeper change that's happening.
This is the first time we have an energy source that is a technology, 100% a technology, not a commodity. We don't have to dig it up as coal. We don't have to tap into it as oil. Why is that important? Because once it's a technology, you can consistently drive down the cost. And there's a kind of a rule of thumb in manufacturing, which if you double the number of producing solar panels, you will come up with about 20% of a drop in cost. And this is the point. It's going to keep getting cheaper. And the same thing, flipping around to the same thing with electric cars. People think, well, electric cars are still expensive and whatever. You're not thinking this through, because battery technology is the same thing. That's in lithium batteries. We're now getting whole nother generations of batteries, like solid state batteries, that essentially will be a next generation. But the point is, the forward motion of costs coming down on clean energies is just beginning. And when that happens, you're going to have what? Abundant, clean energy. Basically, right around the time that we essentially had our earliest breakthroughs on generative AI, which is about 15 years ago, we also had the big breakthrough in what they call CRISPR, which is we figured out a way to cheaply and easily edit the genome of any living thing. And you just take one example. We now know how to take a cell, put it in a vat, and you can give it the same amino acids and the same kind of nutrients and the same things that a cow roaming around a field for like years chewing on grass would get those same nutrients, those same amino acids, and essentially would produce in their muscles the meat. That same thing can happen in a vat to actually grow the same cow cell into actual meat. Not like kind of meat, not like plant-based meat that's kind of like meat. It's meat. It's the same cell.
What do you think? Because I don't know. I haven't fully thought out my position on this. But what I will say is that if it can be verified that it is meat, and it's the same, there's the same kind of benefits that you get from animal meat that are in the lab-grown meat. If it's the same, I'm not opposed to that. If it tastes the same, if it does the good things for me, I'm not opposed to it. Maybe I don't feel like it should be. We have dominion over all animals in the world. That means animals bring us something that we need. So I certainly don't. I'm not saying that we need to remove that. But if the meat is the same meat, and it is identical, I don't see the issue. But it's the nefarious underside of that I wonder. That's all part of the agenda, potentially, to get us to not eat meat. It's tough. What's the consensus here?
Tastes exactly the same. And what's happened, we've only 25 years ago, it's like 2003 was the first time humans had ever cracked or understood the human genome. It took $3 billion, and it took 15 years to do it.
That's
the
cheap.
cost of doing that from $3 billion had been driven down so far, it was $1,000. It's now at the point where it's about $100. And eventually it's going to keep driving down to $50 or nothing. It's not just the same level, it is twice as fast. We can now essentially design these things for outcomes that we want to happen cheaply and easily. So the technology story of today, AI, clean energies, even bioengineering, is kind of familiar at some level. The next several iterations here, though, I think is putting a bigger lens on what's going on today. And it gets us back to what we were describing as what's happening in America is a once in a year reinvention. And in fact, it's even possible that what's going on here is essentially the early days of building a 21st century civilization. And so when you think about that, you go beyond the technology. That's like the foundation. And so the next thing up, I think, from technologies, you start thinking, okay, well, what could you build with those technologies? What kind of an economy would you want to build?
Ooh.
The economic system that the United States has been based on, that has worked for essentially the top 10% for sure, and certainly for the top 1%, has not been working for 80%. And it's gotten to the point where they just have had it. So as crazy as it sounds, we could be at a point in the world right now in 2025 where we are watching the beginnings of a shift from financial capitalism, born and raised out of the Enlightenment, to essentially some version of a sustainable capitalism. We're going from a world of representative democracy, which was a brilliant move forward, to essentially a digital democracy. And we're also going to go from a world of nation states, which again was a great breakthrough from empires and colonies of the past, to some kind of global governance that coordinates the 10 billion people on this planet. That's the level of change I think we're actually heading into. That's the level of change I think your kids are going to be wrestling with, and that's the level of change I think America is going through now. And the quicker we start to wrap our heads around that challenge and the kind of scale of the invention we're up to, the better off we're all going to be.
Whoa. It's kind of undeniable. The change into this kind of like global governance. This is what digital ID is all about. This is what's happening. And we're at the beginning of this 25-year change. Where, there's one thing I don't necessarily agree about here, which was how, the top 1% and then everyone else it's not working for. Do you know what I truly believe this? As long as there are humans, there will be variance in the outcome. So the thing that makes Jeff Bezos so rich, and the thing that makes Elon Musk so rich, and I believe deservedly so, is because they are unlike everyone else. They're not like normal people. They're not like the 99%. They are the top. They're not even like the other people in the 1%. They're not like the other people in the 0.1%. And as you go through that scale, it's the bell curve. I think the people who are in the upper half of people are not like the people in the lower half. I think you can graduate the levels, but I also think it's like if you are a top 1% intellect, you're a top 1% worker, you're a top 1% in the value that you bring to the world, then you should be rewarded as that. I don't think there's a problem with rich people. And the reason I say that as well is because, I guess in comparison to my peers of my age, I would say I'm rich. But when I'm older, I'm going to be very rich. I know I'm going to be rich. And I know I'm not a bad person. I think if you understand that if you provide value to the world and that value solves a real problem, you should be rewarded financially for that. Because you've solved a problem. You've alleviated the pain of a problem, and that's valuable. And that value should convert into something that we can all agree on, which is money. And I think if you are a 1% person, if you're really good and you solve big problems, you should be rich. I don't know. That's what I think. Wow. Great videos. No wonder that's got almost 1 million views. That's crazy. That was Big Think and Free Think collaborated on that, so check them out. Wow. Crazy, crazy. It does signal though. When you think about, okay, we got an opportunity the next 25 years. These things feel inevitable. They feel like that's the trajectory we're on, and we're right at the beginning of it. So how do we position ourselves to be the most, give ourselves the highest chance of making a lot of money? It seems like, yeah, I think blockchain, AI, this bioengineering, which could, I think, is potentially a slippery slope, and free energy. These seem to be the sectors to involve yourself in. It's really just trying to zoom out and think, if these three things are going to take hold, who's going to benefit the most from that? Well, it's going to be companies in those spaces, right? Seems like, if you're looking for pension-worthy investments, seems like that's where it is.